Stories from the Shadows is a Lemon Difficult studio production. Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for free access to all our podcast episodes, behind-the-scenes content for the Key of Dreams and more. That's patreon.com/lemondifficult. Welcome to Stories from the Shadows, a collection of weird tales of the mysterious and macabre, an offering from the team at Lemon Difficult Studio, featuring the cast of our live immersive show, The Key of Dreams Shadows Lengthen, and special guests. These stories are dark tales of misery and woe. Listener discretion is advised. Today, Ricco concludes his telling of Man-Sized in Marble, in which Nesbit shows us the importance of belief in dreams and portents, and of listening to instinct rather than relying entirely on rational thought. We return now to Borderline Radio, broadcasting from very near Treowen, for the conclusion of this tale.
Borderline Radio presents Stories from the Shadows, pleasing terrors for the discerning listener.
I think I am sad, or rather, I am uneasy. I don't think I'm very well. I've shivered 3 or 4 times since we came in, and it is not cold, is it? No, I said, and hoped it was not a chill caught from the treacherous mists that roll up from the marshes in the dying light. No, she said, she did not think so. Then, after a silence, she spoke suddenly. Do you ever have presentiments of evil? No, I said, smiling, and I shouldn't believe in them if I had. I do, she went on. The night my father died, I knew it, though he was right away in the north of Scotland. I did not answer in words. She sat looking at the fire for some time in silence, gently stroking my hand. At last she sprang up, came behind me, and drawing my head back, kissed me. There, it's over now, she said. What a baby I am. Come, light the candles, and we'll have some of these new Rubinstein duets. And we spent a happy hour or 2 at the piano. At about 10:30, I began to long for the good-night pipe, but Laura looked so white that I felt it would be brutal of me to fill our sitting room with the fumes of strong Cavendish. I'll take my pipe outside, I said. Let me come, too? No, sweetheart, not tonight. You're too much tired. I shan't be long. Get to bed, or I shall have an invalid to nurse tomorrow as well as the boots to clean. I kissed her, and was turning to go when she flung her arms round my neck and held me as if she would never let me go again. I stroked her hair. Come, pussy, you're overtired. The housework has been too much for you. She loosened her clasp a little and drew a deep breath. No. We've been very happy today, Jack, haven't we? Don't stay out too long. I won't, my dearie. I strolled out of the front door, leaving it unlatched. What a night it was! The jagged masses of heavy, dark clouds were rolling at intervals from horizon to horizon, and thin white wreaths covered the stars. Through all the rush of the cloud river, the moon swam, breasting the waves and disappearing again in the darkness. When now and again her light reached the woodlands, they seemed to be slowly and noiselessly waving in time to the swing of the clouds above them. There was a strange gray light over all the earth. The fields had that shadowy bloom over them which only comes from the marriage of dew and moonlight, or frost and starlight. I walked up and down, drinking in the beauty of the quiet earth and the changing sky. The night was absolutely silent. Nothing seemed to be abroad. There was no scurrying of rabbits or twitter of the half-asleep birds. And though the clouds went sailing across the sky, The wind that drove them never came low enough to rustle the dead leaves in the woodland paths. Across the meadow I could see the church tower standing out black and gray against the sky. I walked there, thinking over our 3 months of happiness, and of my wife, her dear eyes, her loving ways. Ah, my little girl, my own little girl. What a vision came then of a long, glad life for you and me together. I heard a bell beat from the church. 11 already. I turned to go in, but the night held me. I could not go back into our little warm rooms yet. I would go up to the church. I felt vaguely that it would be good to carry my love and thankfulness to the sanctuary, whither so many loads of sorrow and gladness had been borne by the men and women of the dead years. I looked in at the low window as I went by. Laura was half lying on her chair in front of the fire. I could not see her face. Only her little head showed dark against the pale blue wall. She was quite still, asleep, no doubt. My heart reached out to her as I went on. There must be a God, I thought, and a God who was good. How otherwise could anything so sweet and dear as she have ever been imagined? I walked slowly along the edge of the wood. A sound broke the stillness of the night. It was a rustling in the wood. I stopped and listened. The sound stopped too. I went on, and now distinctly heard another step than mine answer mine, like an echo. It was a poacher, or a wood stealer, most likely, for these were not unknown in our Arcadian neighborhood. But whoever it was, he was a fool not to step more lightly. I turned into the wood, and now the footsteps seemed to come from the path I had just left. It must be an echo, I thought. The wood looked perfect in the moonlight. The large dying ferns and the brushwood showed where through thinning foliage the pale light came down. The tree trunks stood up like Gothic columns all around me. They reminded me of the church, and I turned into the beer bulk and passed through the corpse gate between the graves to the low porch. I paused for a moment on the stone seat where Laura and I had watched the fading landscape. Then I noticed that the door of the church was open, and I blamed myself for having left it unlatched the other night. We were the only people who ever cared to come to the church, except on Sundays, and I was vexed to think that, through our carelessness, the damp autumn airs had had a chance of getting in and injuring the old fabric. I went in. It will seem strange, perhaps, that I should have gone halfway up the aisle before I remembered, with a sudden chill followed by as sudden a rush of self-contempt, that this was the very day and hour when, according to tradition, the shapes drawed out man-size in marble began to walk. Having thus remembered the legend, and remembered it with a shiver of which I was ashamed, I could not do otherwise than walk up towards the altar, just to look at the figures. As I said to myself, really what I wanted was to assure myself, first, that I did not believe the legend, and secondly, that it was not true. I was rather glad that I had come. I thought now I could tell Mrs. Dorman how vain her fancies were, and how peaceful the marble figures slept on through the ghastly hour. With my hands in my pockets, I passed up the aisle. In the gray, dim light, the eastern end of the church looked larger than usual, and the arches above the 2 tombs looked larger too. The moon came out and showed me the reason. I stopped short. My heart gave a leap that nearly choked me, and then sank sickeningly. The bodies, drawed out man-size, were gone, and their marble slabs lay wide and bare in the vague moonlight that slanted through the east window. Were they really gone? Or was I mad? Clenching my nerves, I stooped and passed my hand over the smooth slabs and felt their flat, unbroken surface. Had someone taken the things away? Was it some vile, practical joke? I would make sure, anyway. In an instant I had made a torch of a newspaper, which happened to be in my pocket, and lighting it held it high above my head. Its yellow glare illumined the dark arches and those slabs. The figures were gone, and I was alone in the church. Or was I alone? And then a horror seized me. A horror indefinable and indescribable. An overwhelming certainty of supreme and accomplished calamity. I flung down the torch and tore along the aisle and out through the porch, biting my lips as I ran to keep myself from shrieking aloud. Oh, was I mad? Or what was this that possessed me? I leaped the churchyard wall and took the straight cut across the fields, led by the light from our windows. Just as I got over the first stile, a dark figure seemed to spring out from the ground. Mad still with that certainty of misfortune, I made for the thing that stood in my path, shouting, "Get out of the way, can't you?" But my push met with a more vigorous resistance than I had expected. My arms were caught just above the elbow and held as in a vice, and the raw-boned Irish doctor actually shook me. "Would ye?" he cried, in his own unmistakable accents. "Would ye, then?" "Let me go, you fool!" I gasped. "The marble figures have gone from the church. I tell you, they've gone." He broke into a ringing laugh. "I'll have to give you a draught tomorrow, I see. You've been smoking too much and listening to old wives' tales." "I tell you, I've seen the bare slabs." "Well, come back with me. I'm going up to old Palmer's. His daughter's ill. We'll look in at the church and let me see the bare slabs." "You go if you like," I said, a little less frantic for his laughter. "I'm going home to my wife." "Rubbish, man," said he. "Do you think I'll permit of that? Are ye to go saying all your life that you've seen solid marble endowed with vitality, and me to go all me life saying you were a coward? No, sir, you shan't do it." The night air, a human voice, and I think also the physical contact with this 6 feet of solid common sense brought me back a little to my ordinary self, and the word coward was a mental shower bath. "Come on, then," I said sullenly. "Perhaps you're right." He still held my arm tightly. We got over the stile and back to the church. All was still as death. The place smelt very damp and earthy. We walked up the aisle. I am not ashamed to confess that I shut my eyes. I knew the figures would not be there. I heard Kelly strike a match. "Here they are, you see, right enough. You've been dreaming or drinking, asking your pardon for the imputation." I opened my eyes. By Kelly's expiring vesta, I saw 2 shapes lying in their marble, on their slabs. I drew a deep breath and caught his hand. "I'm awfully indebted to you," I said. "It must have been some trick of light, or I have been working rather hard. Perhaps that's it. Do you know, I was quite convinced they were gone." "I'm aware of that," he answered rather grimly. "You'll have to be careful of that brain of yours, my friend, I assure ye." He was leaning over and looking at the right-hand figure, whose stony face was the most villainous and deadly in expression. "By Jove," he said, "something has been afoot here. This hand is broken." And so it was. I was certain that it had been perfect the last time Laura and I had been there. "Perhaps someone has tried to remove them," said the young doctor. "That won't account for my impression," I objected. Too much painting and tobacco will account for that well enough." "Come along," I said, "or my wife will be getting anxious. You'll come in and have a drop of whiskey, and drink confusion to ghosts and better sense to me." "I ought to up to Palmer's, but it's so late now I'd best leave it till the morning," he replied. I was kept late at the Union, and I've had to see a lot of people since." "All right, I'll come back with ye." I think he fancied I needed him more than did Palmer's girl. So, discussing how such an illusion could have been possible, and deducing from this experience large generalities concerning ghostly apparitions, we walked up to our cottage. We saw, as we walked up the garden path, that bright light streamed out of the front door, and presently saw that the parlor door was open too. Had she gone out? "Come in," I said, and Dr. Kelly followed me into the parlor. It was all ablaze with candles, not only the wax ones, but at least a dozen guttering, glaring tallow dips stuck in vases and ornaments in unlikely places. Light, I knew, was Laura's remedy for nervousness. Poor child. Why had I left her? Brute that I was. We glanced around the room, and at first we did not see her. The window was open, and the draught set all the candles flaring one way. Her chair was empty, and her handkerchief and book lay on the floor. I turned to the window. There, in the recess of the window, I saw her. Oh, my child, my love, had she gone to that window to watch for me? And what had come into the room behind her? To what had she turned with that look of frantic fear and horror? Oh, my little one! Had she thought that it was I whose steps she heard and turned to meet? What? She had fallen back across a table in the window, and her body lay half on it and half on the window seat, and her head hung down over the table, the brown hair loosened and fallen to the carpet. Her lips were drawn back, and her eyes wide, wide open. They saw nothing now. What had they seen last? The doctor moved towards her, but I pushed him aside and sprang to her, caught her in my arms, and cried, "It's all right, Laura! It's all right, Laura! I've got you safe, wifey!" She fell into my arms in a heap. I clasped her and kissed her and called her by all her pet names, but I think I knew all the time that she was dead. Her hands were tightly clenched. In one of them she held something fast. When I was quite sure that she was dead, and that nothing mattered at all any more, I let him open her hand to see what she held. It was a gray marble finger.
That was Stories from the Shadows, presented by Borderline Radio. Join us again tomorrow at the intersection of sanity and revelation.
Thank you for listening to Stories from the Shadows, an audio production from Lemon Difficult Studio. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to follow us on socials and join our Patreon at patreon.com/lemondifficult for exclusive rewards. Members of our free tier have access to all episodes of Stories from the Shadows, as well as behind-the-scenes content and the latest updates on our live immersive show, The Key of Dreams: Shadows Lengthen. Until next time, dream by daylight.